What's up, guys? I'm DK, and you're watching Pro Wrestling What If, the series where I look at the different what if scenarios as terms of the world that we call professional wrestling. At Survivor Series 2012, Dean Ambrose, Seth Rollins, and Roman Reigns would make their main roster debut and form the group The Shield. The Shield would dominate WWE for over a year as they would take out superstars such as John Cena, The Rock, and even The Undertaker, while in the process all claiming championship gold at one point. And even after losing their championships, they would continue their rise as they feud with CM Punk and even a match with the Wyatt family at Elimination Chamber in 2014. With the fans really behind the Shield, this resulted in a new babyface run shortly after that match with the Wyatt family, in a match with the New Age Outlaws and Corporate Kane at WrestleMania 30, and even having back-to-back wins against the legendary faction Evolution at Extreme Rules and Payback in 2014. The night after Payback on Monday Night Raw, Triple H claims that there was going to be a Plan B executed for the Authority, which resulted in Seth Rollins hitting Roman Reigns in the back with a steel chair and eventually attacking Ambrose also. This would propel Seth Rollins to the top of the WWE mountain as he would win the Money in the Bank briefcase and eventually cashing it in during the main event of WrestleMania 31, which had former Shield brethren Roman Reigns as a part of that match also, and would successfully win the championship. Roman Reigns would be propelled to the main event scene as he did win the Royal Rumble in 2015 and go on to have a world title match against Brock Lesnar, which would result in Seth Rollins' cash-in after that, while Dean Ambrose had fell to the upper mid-card picture as he would constantly be featured in mostly the Intercontinental Championship picture. Now, as this is getting released, it's actually during the weekend that we actually do celebrate the 10-year anniversary of that specific moment of the Shield breaking up. And there's a lot of people that think of that what if scenario as terms to what if Seth Rollins wasn't the one to break the Shield, which will be today's episode, in which the way that I gotta execute this episode is that I'm going to be following two different paths. And of course, it's the path of what if Roman Reigns was the one that ended the Shield, and what if Dean Ambrose was the one to end the Shield. So I'm gonna first start off with the path of what would happen if Roman Reigns was the one to end the Shield. And I think first off, it would be exactly like we've seen with Rollins, where he does join the Authority. And I think it definitely makes sense because the Authority knows about the lineage of Roman Reigns' family, especially his cousin The Rock being at one point one of the faces of WWE, even to the point to where a lot of us consider him to be a part of that Mount Rushmore of WWE. So with that in mind, it makes the Authority think that Roman Reigns is indeed the next guy to be the top of the mountain of WWE. Now, I don't think the Usos would be joining Roman Reigns as kind of more of a bloodline thing, considering that the Usos were the hottest babyface tag team at the time and even were holding the tag team championships at the particular time. I do think that Roman Reigns, just like Seth Rollins, would win the Money in the Bank briefcase that year in 2014 and would hold it for a long period of time before cashing it in. Now, you're probably also wondering, because in 2015, Roman Reigns in the real timeline won the Royal Rumble and challenged Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania. So who wins the Royal Rumble, and is it either Rollins or Ambrose? And my answer to that is no, neither Ambrose or Rollins is going to win this match, because I think that Daniel Bryan would be the winner of the Royal Rumble match in 2015. I think the whole storyline aspect would make sense, considering that, of course, in 2014, Daniel Bryan did main event WrestleMania and walked out as the world champion, hence the phrase, the miracle on Bourbon Street. But then eventually in the next couple of months, he would be forced to vacate the championship due to neck injury, which would lead to the ladder match that would see John Cena become the champion before ultimately losing it to Brock Lesnar. So I think Daniel Bryan having a nice chase storyline where he would win the Royal Rumble and go after the championship, of course, that he had never lost, and we would actually have gotten Daniel Bryan versus Brock Lesnar much earlier than we did at Survivor Series 2018. And I think in this match, we would actually see Daniel Bryan defeat Brock Lesnar, which would result in Brock Lesnar being irate to the fact that he actually lost to a guy like Daniel Bryan and would attack him after after the match with suplex after suplex, literally taking him to Suplex City, which then at this point would result in Roman Reigns cashing in his Money in the Bank briefcase and successfully becoming the WWE champion. And this is something that the Authority definitely would have wanted to happen, considering that they wouldn't have wanted a guy like Daniel Bryan, a guy they considered a B+ player, to once again walk out WrestleMania as the world champion. And I think at this particular time, Roman Reigns probably would have had a pretty lengthy championship reign for the most part. Maybe even resulting into actually finally having The Rock versus Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 32, which The Rock did compete in the match, although it was 6 seconds. I think The Rock would have been more motivated that it was his cousin Roman Reigns he would have been facing to actually have a full-length match with. But you're probably wondering what happens to Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins now that it's Roman Reigns that is the full-fledged heel in this scenario. Unfortunately, I still think Dean Ambrose is still relegated to that upper mid-card picture, just like we've seen in the real timeline, and that Seth Rollins would be a pretty big babyface, but he wouldn't be propelled right to the world championship picture right away like we've seen him in the real timeline, considering that, of course, Seth Rollins was always more of a Triple H guy rather than a Vince McMahon guy, so Vince McMahon probably would have booked Seth Rollins more of exactly the same way as Ambrose, where it's more of that upper mid-card picture, mostly going for either the United States or Intercontinental Championships, and then if they need them for a World Championship match, they can just slide in right there. Now we're going to be talking about what would happen had Dean Ambrose been the one that had ended the Shield. Now, I think a lot of us agreed that we all thought that Dean Ambrose was going to be the one that ended up ending the Shield. They actually planted the seeds near the end of 2013 when they had lost the 3-on-1 handicap match against CM Punk, where it almost seemed like it was going to be Ambrose to be the one that ended the Shield and becomes the full-fledged heel in this case. So for this scenario, though, I am going to make two scenarios because it could be the scenario of what if Ambrose ended the Shield at the time that it was actually originally supposed to end, according to even Seth Rollins himself in previous interviews, or at the exact same time that both the real timeline and the Roman Reigns alternate timeline would have happened, which is the night after Payback in 2014. So going down to the timeline of when it originally was supposed to happen near the end of 2013 going into 2014 is that after that CM Punk match, you do see that divide, and I think maybe in this case we could still see the Wyatt family versus the Shield at Elimination Chamber that year, and especially because I believe in the real timeline the Wyatt family actually won the match. So maybe that was the match right there that could have caused for Dean Ambrose to end the Shield in that case and officially dissolve the group. And I think with this kind of breakup, I think this would lead to the Shield triple threat match involving all three of these guys. And if I'm not mistaken, at this particular time, Dean Ambrose is still the WWE United States champion, and that this Shield triple threat match would be for the United States Championship. Who would walk out as champion? I think in this particular time, Roman Reigns would be the brand new champion. Of course, I think in this timeline, and of course what we've seen in the real timeline, that WWE were really pushing for Roman Reigns to be that next top guy in WWE. And had they done it this way, maybe fans would have respected Roman Reigns more by going after a mid-card title picture instead of going straight into the World Championship scene. Especially because I believe that's a reason why people loved Bret Hart so much, because he started in, let's say, a tag team, and then he worked his way up to that Intercontinental title picture before going to that World Championship picture, really earning his way to the top. And they could have easily done that with Roman Reigns, where of course he was the tag team champions with Seth Rollins during the real timeline, and then he could have been the United States champion or maybe the Intercontinental champion before becoming the WWE World Heavyweight Champion shortly after, and that could have really built up Roman Reigns to being a top babyface instead of basically being shoved down our throats. And then once again, I feel like Seth Rollins in this particular time would kind of fall in the same way like I mentioned with the Roman Reigns timeline, where it's more upper mid card, just like we've seen Ambrose in the real timeline. But I'm going to mention about what would happen with Ambrose next, because I'm going to talk about the scenario involving what would happen if Ambrose ended the Shield the night after Payback, in which first of all, I think that Ambrose would not join the Authority. I've read a lot of Reddit posts and people think that Ambrose would be just an authority figure, just like we seen with Seth Rollins and essentially like I mentioned with Roman Reigns realistically in his timeline. But I just feel it just doesn't make sense for Dean Ambrose's gimmick. Maybe even once in a while make deals with the authority, but not actually be a part of the authority. And just like the two timelines, I actually do think that Dean Ambrose would be the winner of the 2014 Money in the Bank ladder match, and this actually would play into effect that I feel like would happen either it ending after Payback or at the timeline of when I think it was originally supposed to happen. And as terms to Ambrose cashing it in, I don't think that Dean Ambrose would be cashing it in either in the middle or after the World Championship match at WrestleMania, becoming the first person to do so at WrestleMania. I think at that particular time, we actually would see Roman Reigns cleanly pin Brock Lesnar and walk out of WrestleMania as the WWE World Heavyweight Champion, but I do see eventually a match happening between Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose for the world title, where it would basically be a predetermined Money in the Bank cash-in. I think Dean Ambrose would actually wait almost an entire year after winning the briefcase to actually cash in. You can actually develop a cool storyline where even though Ambrose plans to cash in for a full-on match with Reigns at Money in the Bank, maybe he might actually tease the idea of cashing in that briefcase beforehand, and you might not know whether this match at Money in the Bank 2015 would actually happen. And by doing so, it actually works out well as terms of the timeline, because of course with the Money in the Bank briefcase, you have exactly 1 year to cash in. And through further research, the 2014 Money in the Bank pay-per-view happened on June 29th, 2014, while the 2015 event, I believe, happened on like June 16th or 17th, making it only a couple weeks before the actual contract expires, so Ambrose could cash in the briefcase at that particular time. But there's a specific reason why I'm booking it this way. In this match, they do actually have the match at Money in the Bank, which would result in Dean Ambrose actually successfully winning the match and becoming the new WWE champion. However, after working a long match, all of a sudden, burn it down! Seth Rollins, who in this timeline had won the 2015 Money in the Bank briefcase, actually cashes in on Dean Ambrose and would have a match against him, resulting in Seth Rollins walking out as the new WWE champion. Even though this is kind of the same scenario we got a year after in the real timeline, where the Shield members would have the WWE champion at one point at the same night, this would create the first ever time in a scenario I feel like WWE, I'm surprised, hasn't done yet, of a double Money in the Bank cash-in, where one cash-in happens on that night and then another cash-in happens on the person who had just cashed in. And I think this would work out even kind of playing towards the real timeline, where maybe at the Battleground pay-per-view the next month, we actually still get Seth Rollins versus Brock Lesnar for the WWE champion, but this time babyface Seth Rollins versus a full-fledged heel Brock Lesnar, which could still result in the idea of having Brock Lesnar versus Undertaker as a match at SummerSlam with the way that they had booked it. And I think this would mean that at SummerSlam that year in 2015, we would actually have the Shield triple threat match in this timeline for the WWE Championship. Who wins that triple threat match though? I don't exactly know. I think this is maybe where you guys would officially sound off in the comments section below. Anyways, guys, that is going to be the end of this edition of Pro Wrestling What If. And if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Press the notifications to be notified of when future content releases, and share this to all your friends, and let me know what you think would happen if Seth Rollins wasn't the one to end the Shield in 2014. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you guys next week on Pro Wrestling What If.